are, and this is where we want to go. And the value of these comprehensive community plans is that it requires, to be successful, requires community input. So probably a lot of community gatherings, surveys, questionnaires, gathering data from people. And the purpose of a comprehensive, a CCP, is to help leadership, whoever that may be, steer the ship. So where are we trying to go? Where has the membership told us to go? And it's a really long process trying to achieve all of those objectives of where you want to be, because they're pretty diverse. Everybody has a different idea, a different thought, but there's some themes. And so some of the themes that came out of that CCP was the desire amongst the membership to have a stronger governance structure, to create customized laws and protocols for the community that better reflected your culture and who you are. Of course, to have more control over your lands, your territory, your housing, your health, and other areas of government. So I don't think any of these objectives are new. They were probably there before the CCP started. They're certainly there after the CCP started. But what can we do to try and change things a little bit at a time? And so what we're going to share with you this evening is one tool that's available to try and achieve the goals that the membership set through the CCP. Next. Okay. In addition to the CCP, we have something called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP. Some of you may have heard about this, maybe not. It's an international document that many countries support. Canada is one of the countries that supports this declaration. And there's many, many different statements and components of this declaration. But two of them state that Indigenous people have the right to self-determination. So you have the right to determine for yourselves how you want your political system to look, how you want to pursue economic development, socially, how you want to progress. You have the right to do that as Indigenous people. The declaration also said that you have the right to govern yourselves in the ways that you see fit, that's appropriate for you. Now, pretty big goals. How do you get there, right? Takes a lot of work. Change is difficult and it's scary sometimes, and you might not know the steps, how to build the house. You're not a carpenter. Self-determination is one of those tools in the toolbox that can help communities try and achieve, among other things, self-determination and self-government. So again, it's a tool. Look at it that way. But there's other tools in the toolbox. It's not the only tool. Okay. Okay. So what's our roadmap here? So we know that UCCP helped develop the plan. We're also going to look at why self-government or self-determination might be a tool that you can utilize. How does it work? And then we hope to answer some questions. We'll actually throw out some questions that crossed our minds, but you might have some others. Okay, let me just pause there for a quick second, because keep this in mind. This process that I'm going to share with you isn't a done deal, and we're coming to tell you about it after the fact. Okay? This is something that's being worked on and contemplated. Is it the best tool for you to use? It might be for now, it might be for long term, but the purpose is to share with you that it's available for you to take a look at. Okay? Next thing. Okay, so this will be a reminder for those that were involved in the comprehensive community. Yeah.
I was neighbor to my neighbor.
Oh. It's like I've seen you for 40 minutes in here and you're waving to me now? Okay, so the comprehensive community plan, really good work, that you guys did. Nobody can take it away from you. It's your voice, it's your narrative, it's your thoughts, and you were fortunate enough to capture it on paper before 2018. This is available for you folks. It used to be on your website, it might still be. And I think there's some efforts to try and continue breathing life back into where you left this off in 2018, which is a good thing. These are living documents, they change as you do. So CCP looked at a number of, as I said, where you were, where you are, where you're going. And it developed different themes for your community. I won't go through all of these themes, but some of them are your social condition, your housing, your governance structure, recreation for youth, infrastructure. So what do you have, in terms of providing services for yourselves? Economic development. Everybody wants economic sustainability. Doesn't matter who you are. And you need to put food on your plate, and you got to want to work. Education, health and wellness. These are really important pieces. Language and culture. Never want to lose sight of that. And land and resources. What's available to you for tools to manage all of these things? So when you look at these themes, part of the CCP was understanding where people wanted to go as it related to recreation and youth, infrastructure, ECDEV. So the CCP developed a series of short and long-term plans. Year one, so from 2015 to 2016, what did you do? You came together and you solicited information from people. Okay. A number of reports occurred, a number of community meetings occurred. Year two, you worked on creating the common visions and the goals. So what are we even doing here on this CCP? What are we trying to achieve? What are our actionable items going to be? Year three, 2017 to 18, and 2018 is when this document got produced. You look at that entire journey that you've mapped out for yourselves, and you've tried to forecast where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. Okay. All right. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So this is where it starts to get complicated. It's one thing to ask people what they think, how they feel, and what they want to do, but what do you do with that information? And how do you set that path? So you do have to create some strategies. So for example, for culture and education, what can you do to enhance culture and education within your community? So one objective was to create a heritage policy. That's a tool now that you've created. Another tool could be an inventory of cultural artifacts or cultural history and what your current language status is. It's another tool. Let's move on. Governance. There were some objectives to increase your governance capacity. Well, what can you do? One, do we want to look at our membership code? This came up. So this came from your community members. Do you want to look at the election code? Do things need to be changed, tinkered with? Hey, everything's a race car. You got to run it, take it in the garage, tinker with it, run it again, see if it works. Do you want to introduce youth to the governance and council? So where do young people and elders sit in decision making and leadership? Is there room for them at the table? How do you get there? Let's keep moving. ECDEV. So one of the items that came up in the CCP, again, I wasn't there, but one of the items that came up was let's deal with our lease matters. I think this is something that's been continuing to be working on, a lot of efforts going into that. Lands, develop a land use plan. So there's a couple ways of tackling this. You can develop a land use plan for the reserve. Then you can do a land use plan for your territory. Much bigger task, but equally important, right? Who's doing what, where, what's your voice in those activities occurring in your territory or on your reserve? Rights and title. There was some real interest in settling any specific claim that the community might have against the feds, which I think you've made progress on. Benefit agreements, if a mining company or a forestry company or a hydro company wants to do something in your territory, how do you negotiate agreement with them to bring value to the community so that maybe you have the resources to do some things on your own without the support or assistance of the governments. This is another goal. Economic reconciliation means economic independence, means strong government, strong community.
And you know, Rob, some of those are already done.
They're already done.
And
right?
or in program, so, I can see 3 of them right now that were way past.
Yeah.
that.
So this is good. Thanks for that. Because I think one of the next slides looks at where you're at. So keep in mind, 2015, 16, 17, 18. This is what people said. That's a little bit wild. That's a little few years ago. So what have you been managed to accomplish? Quite a bit, actually. And then infrastructure and housing, modern, safe, energy efficient designs and languages on billboards. Who doesn't want that for their house or their infrastructure for the community? How do you get there? Go ahead, Gladys. Okay. Who is this? Okay, Susie Thomas and Chief Ken Basket. Good photos. So this must have been through it in the CCP. Second phase. Okay, cool. So again, this is what was accomplished. You have CCP goals. Increase governance capacity and implement new systems and training. What have you done? Well, you as a community, through your leadership, have accomplished a financial administration law. This is good. You created, you follow it. It was done in 2015. A land code, that's for the reserve. Okay, so you currently have a land code. Governance policy 2017, financial policy 17, info human records management policy 2017, an HR policy, social housing policy, council and meetings policy. So some of these policies may have existed in some form or another before the CCP. This was an opportunity again to refine those policies. And that's not to say it's done deal. You still have an opportunity to further refine as you grow, educate, learn more, get better input from your community members. Review program delivery and operations annually. This has been completed and it's occurring annually. It's ongoing. Improve financial transparency. Where's the money going? 2016-17 audit was completed on time. And again, this is occurring every year, financial transparency. Band meeting, creating like this. Bring people together. It's a safe environment. We're having some grub. It's good to see everybody. The cake was good. People should have started at the cake, apparently. But you know, this is a good, safe environment to have a dialogue and talk to each other in a nice, friendly, respectful way. Communication on education on governments through newsletters, website, and media. This is complete and it's always being improved, right? I know that one thing that leadership is looking at is possibly doing a little in the newsletter, a did you know section. Okay, all right. Did you know? And it'll be a little bit of your history. And people can read that because I didn't know. And there's probably other people that didn't know. So how can the community members contribute to that? A little did you know? I think it's kind of fun and cool. Create a Shuswap Band Youth Council. Incomplete. All right. This is something we got to work on. It's what the CCP wanted. How do you get there? Develop an election and membership code. Incomplete. Well, they're tinkering with it. You have one, but there was a desire to update it, make it more current and reflect the needs and wants of the membership. How do you tinker with that? An annual strategic plan and for priorities and membership. I think this meeting is contributing to that annual strategic plan. In 2 areas, we're reminding you of what you told us in the CCP. Hey, are we still on course? Is this still the case? 2, here is some strategic direction or tools to help you get there. So ongoing and continuing to work on. Go ahead, buddy. Okay. Comprehensive community plan objectives that you've already identified a decade ago, right? 10 years ago. Self-governance, which is really the core of what we're here to talk to you about. How can self-governance help you as a tool achieve some of those CCP objectives? When we initially started discussions with the federal government on self-governance, it became very clear, educating ourselves, what is this? It became clear to your leadership pretty quick. I remember hearing about all this during the CCP. What's the connection back to the CCP? And this is why that CCP is a living document. If you're not continually looping back to it through what you're doing now, then it doesn't have any values. It's a stale document. So self-governance can help Shuswap develop a custom election code that will define how you hold referendums, who is eligible to vote, who is eligible to be an elected leader, how your election system actually runs. Maybe you want it different than it's occurring right now. So again, I'll emphasize, this isn't baked in. There isn't an answer already been made, and we're now sharing it with you. This is an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I don't like the way the election system works. I have a couple ideas. Or, hey, the community down the road and around the corner does it like this. And that might work for us too. So self-governance allows you, or gives you the tools to change that, to have it be what you want it to be. If it's not working for you, what we've heard through the CCP is it wasn't quite working the way you wanted it to work. Okay. Custom membership code could allow Shuswap Band to determine who its members or citizens are and what rights and responsibilities they would have. Now, self-governance does not create who has status and who doesn't have status. That still remains within the hands of the federal government. Unless you were going to negotiate a treaty, which is not what we're doing. Okay? So status is still out of your hands, but you have the opportunity as a community member to say, this is what we think a criteria should be for people to belong to the Shuswap Band. And it could even be someone that's non-Indigenous, but they've had a long history in your community, and you as a community felt that they've met a criteria threshold to be embraced by your community as a community member and receive those services. They would not get status. Community member, okay? Go ahead, Gladdy. Okay. So this is important. And what have you achieved? You did your land code and your financial admin in 2015. Right now, based on what people told you folks during the CCP, there's all sorts of different election codes and all sorts of membership codes floating around out there because your CCP, while it's yours, isn't unique. There's a lot of communities out there that felt the same way in terms of what needed to be improved and what needed to be focused on. So we knew that there's already been a number of communities that have used self-government as a tool to try and achieve those goals of a comprehensive community plan. So there's a lot of examples of different election codes and membership codes out right now. And that's part of the research that we're doing. Well, what's available? What's some really cool ideas to do this? You're also in discussions with the federal government to try and take more authority or control about what's happening on reserve. Now, keep in mind, when Shuswap's in discussions with the federal government, it just deals with what's happening on the reserve primarily. Yeah. So that's I guess, the rules or the box in which we're having these discussions with the feds. Importantly, it's not a treaty. You're not giving up any rights. You're not giving up any status. You're not giving up any lands. That's not what we're talking about. This does take time to do a self-government agreement with the federal government because it relies so much on what the membership's mandate is. And you have to have meetings like this, share information, you might not have any comments for me today, but you'll certainly have comments down tomorrow, the day after, the day, whatever it might be. I encourage you to think about these sorts of questions and these sorts of discussions and get back to Manal or Barb or Mark or Rich or whoever, myself. So we are in these discussions with the federal government, exploring what these options are of self-government as a tool to take on more control and develop and achieve those goals within your CCP. What's really important is to get community members involved in this. So this is one way. Another way is, it's been my experience that it's really helpful if you bring a community member on board. And that person who might not have any exposure or background in any of this has an opportunity to observe, to learn, provide input, share with their family and others. They're not an elected leader. So it's that's what they're bringing to the table. Okay, they're bringing their true self to the table and unbiased. There's nothing swaying anything, and so that's comfortable for people sometimes. And you never know. You might choose to pursue this, and you might champion the CCP, and you might champion self-government. It's really up to you. So I think that's going to be coming soon. The opportunity for community members to participate and just be part of this, right, Gladys? Okay, so why negotiate? So, quick reminder. Shuswap, along with all the first Aboriginal people in Canada and including Secwepemc Nation, your neighbors, are all part of a collection of Indigenous people that were put under the rule of the Crown, the federal government. The Indian Act was created, Indian reserves were created, identity was created by the Crown. That's what we're living with today. Okay? And to think of things other than that, because we're so used to it, can be intimidating sometimes. But I'd like you just to step out of your comfort zone for a little bit and think about what some different opportunities and options might be. We know that Shuswap has already exerted historically self-governance and self-determination. So you've been at this for a while without me and without the people in this room. You've been doing it. 1876. You become a member of, you fall into the Indian Act. 1895, 20 years later, along with the Ktunaxa and the Stoney, you sign a hunting agreement. Who's familiar with that? Very cool. Okay. Just a quick little background on this one. It's available online. It's probably in the band off. Someone can print it off for you. It's a really cool document. It's public. In 1895, the government was experiencing Indigenous people from east of the mountains coming into the valley and hunting and getting salmon. And they were experiencing Indigenous people from this side going across the mountains and hunting. And it was creating some challenges, not only for the Indigenous people, but for the government to administer what was going on. You have First Nations people going from Alberta to BC back and forth, and there were parks, there was all sorts of things. So the government approached the Stoney Nakoda, your neighbors, the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap, and they sat down in 1895, they negotiated and they signed a hunting agreement between the three nations. So the three communities, that is, Shuswap, Ktunaxa, and
Shuswap, Akiskanook,
Akiskanook.
Akum.
Yeah, so Shuswap, Akiskanook, and Akum signed it on this side of the mountains. Stoney Nakoda signed it on the other side of the mountains. And in short, this agreement said, we agree you, Stoney, can come here and harvest. And the Stoney said, we agree you, Akiskanook, Shuswap, and Akum, you can come to that side and hunt. Pretty neat. 1895. What is this? This is a prime example of flexing some self-determination and self-governance muscle. Going back to 1895. So you guys did that. We know a quick jump, 1910. So what's that? 15 years later, Shuswap appears again with the other Secwepemc chiefs, writing a letter to the Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier saying, hey, we've got a bad deal. We have the right to self-governance. We have the right to our land. This is another very important document that was sent to Ottawa, okay? All the Secwepemc chiefs came together. So, example 2, way before our time, of your leaders saying, hey, hold on. We want to change the tools that are in the toolbox. You know what this was? 1876 and 1910? That was your leaders listening to the first comprehensive community plan. Okay, so pretty cool if you look at it in that way. Go ahead, Gladys. Okay, let's jump. 1982, real quick, the government of Canada removes himself under the under the Crown. Pierre Trudeau develops the Constitution of 1982. Originally, when this 1982 Canadian Constitution was written, there was nothing in it about Indigenous people. Okay? You had national Indigenous organizations protest, say, hold on, we are unique people under the Indian Act. The Crown administers the Indian Act. You're not going to sign a constitution with Britain and not even mention us. So Section 35 was developed. It's baked into the 1982 Canadian Constitution. Really important stuff. Why? Because it recognizes that, first of all, it defines Aboriginal people of Canada. So now it's a legal term that's in your Constitution. Second, it states that Aboriginal people of Canada have always had Aboriginal rights and title. We didn't create it through this Constitution. It's always been there. This goes back to when Britain and France were fighting in the 1700s. Britain won, France lost their control over North America. And the treaty they signed included something called the Proclamation of 1763. I'm getting to the weeds.
Yeah.
But the Proclamation of 1763 was critical because in that treaty between Britain and France, it said Indigenous people cannot be displaced from their lands unless there's an agreement in place. That's why you have all these historic treaties, Treaty 1 to Treaty 11. That's why in BC, you've got modern day treaties. You can't remove Indigenous people from the land because they've always had the right to their land unless there's an agreement of some kind, and the agreement has to be done between the Indigenous community and the Crown, the government. Anyways, Section 35, you have and you always had Aboriginal rights and title. Throw on top of that, I previously spoke about the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. You have the right to certain achievements and aspirations and government goals for yourself. Canada signed off on this. That's where we live. In addition to that, in 2019, the province, they put into law DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So what the province did, BC, is they said, okay, we're in Canada. Canada supports UNDRIP, which has all of these important objectives and rights that Indigenous people have. How are we going to make this happen in BC? Like, how do you implement that? What do you do? So they put together the act, which lays out the action items that the province is going to do. Interestingly, side note, the province has realized they're in a real big pickle with this right now, and they're trying to figure out what to do. But until then, this is what they got to do. Okay? So, the reason why I think it's important to give this little brief history is going back to 1895, going back to the Secwepemc letter to Sir Wilfrid Laurier, going back to 1982, section 35, Indigenous Aboriginal people, then UNDRIP, then DRIPA. These are all examples, in my mind, of Indigenous people flexing, pushing back and saying, hold on, we have our own ideas, we want to do our own thing, and this is how we want to do it. So based on that, the federal government developed that tool, which is called self-determination and self-government, which is, again, one mechanism to achieve goals. Right, Claudia? Now, why did we do this? Another brief little snippet. The Indian Act. It's what all status Indians in Canada abide by and live under. It defines, in most cases, what your election system looks like. It defines how you receive funding. It defines who you are. It defines where your reserves are. And all of this is kept on a ledger in Ottawa and in Vancouver. So status Indian, you've got your number, it's in a book. And it's an approach where the federal or the Crown thought, this is the way we're going to do it, one size fits all. Another little side note. There was a point in time when Pierre Trudeau, the elder, was prime minister. And Jean Chrétien was the prime minister, was the Minister of Indian Affairs at the time. And they developed something called the White Paper. It's not on here, but it's interesting. The White Paper. And the White Paper was a plan to get rid of the Indian Act. They said, we're getting rid of the Indian Act for all these reasons. It's restrictive, it defines people, it has, but really, it meant that this was going to cost a lot of money. And there's a lot of administrative activities and tasks to, so let's get rid of it. And you would think that the reaction from Indigenous people in Canada would have been, okay, yeah, let's get rid of it. But the national organizations at the time said, not a chance. If you get rid of the Indian Act, you are getting rid of us being defined as unique people and founding people within the country. So we are no longer going to have that unique status as being different from the rest of the people in Canada, the rest of the Canadian citizens. Important. So it didn't get repealed. The White Paper didn't work. The Indian Act lives on. But it's interesting. The Indian Act still retains the power for the federal government to appoint or replace executors of wills when people pass away. Being allowed to operate government farms on reserve land, you need permission to do these sorts of things. Taking authority over property of someone that's mentally ill, and operating schools on reserve. So this is slowly changing, but there's a heck of a lot of authority that the federal government has right now over people and activities that are occurring on reserve. We've heard from CCP, we don't really dig that so much. What changes can we make? So a modern self-government agreement moves away from the Indian Act a little bit. It's still there. You're not getting rid of it. It's still there, but it allows you to take on more responsibility and authority in areas that you want to. It doesn't eliminate your status, doesn't change that. But if you want to take on more roles, you decide where you want to do that and how you're going to do it. Go ahead, Gladney. Hey, Tim. Hey. So this is happening in a variety of different places already. So one would be in West Bank. Anybody know where that is? Kelowna, West Bank? Okay, you probably have been to. Yeah, that's right. They have enhanced self-government over there. So they have community protection laws. So they allow to issue restraining orders, conduct hearings and appeals. It's enforced by the RCMP and West Bank officers. It's pretty good. It worked for them there. They have an advisory council. I thought this was kind of interesting. This is a council to represent non-member residents who live on West Bank lands, and it gives them a voice. Now, they don't have veto, can't make the decision, but at least there's a forum for them to come together and have a voice to chief and council. Hey, as a non-member living here, does my opinion count? So this is for West Bank. I'm not saying do it here. This is an example of West Bank did. Go ahead, Gladys. Okay. Simp, your neighbor. They have enhanced self-government, looking after relations law and people law. And in this particular case, they took authority or control over child and family services from the province. Big job, a lot of work. How do you get there? First step is, if this is something you want to do, you need to say, this is something we want to do. Okay? You know, there's all sorts of ways to build the house, because there's people out there that do that. But if you don't want a house, you have to say, I don't want a house. But if you do, hey, this is something that interests us. Maybe you just want to learn more about it. I don't know. Whitecap Dakota Nation. Where is this, Fawn? Saskatchewan. Southern Saskatchewan. This was a recent agreement that the Whitecap did, probably the most recent self-governance agreement. And they signed a comprehensive self-government agreement with Canada, and they passed laws. So comprehensive means they took on, I believe, a lot of responsibility that would typically be in the hands of the federal government as it related to activities and decisions on reserve. Really important to say, if self-government is something that is of interest, you don't have to do everything at once. You could say, like Simp did, hey, our priority is children and family. That's the only way that we want to do this. Okay, that's the only way we want to focus on right now. Then you handle it, you tackle it. Then maybe down the road you want to take on policing. Okay, how do we do that? Maybe so you can do it incrementally, steps at a time. Go like that. Hey, how does it happen? Okay. Important to remember. As Barb mentioned, we're learning about this and inching this forward and exploring self-government with Canada. Because this is all Canada's jurisdiction, reserve. But you've got territory that's not reserve. It's crown land, it's private land, it's public land. There's all sorts of activities occurring. There's mines being built, bridges being built, hydro lines going through. BC, and that's the responsibility of BC, all the stuff off reserve. But BC also has a hand in healthcare and child and family services off reserve. Whereas Canada's just on reserve. So in order to achieve some of your comprehensive community plans off reserve, BC has to be a willing participant and say, okay, we will talk to you, Shuswap, about achieving some of these goals for all these activities and events that are off reserve. So far, I might be getting ahead of myself. So far, BC has been listening, observing. They haven't said we're willing to do this with Shuswap yet. There's probably all sorts of reasons. Money's one, they don't have any. Two, they're trying to figure out what to do with DRIPA, this law that they created that's biting them in the butt. Three, you know, you're in a pretty busy area surrounded by a lot of other First Nations. So how do you handle that situation? Canada, they've said, if you've got these goals, Shuswap, and you want to deal with self-governance for activities and services and everything that would occur on your reserve, we're more than willing to work with you to try and achieve those goals. Just tell us what they are. Okay, Gladys. Okay. Remember I talked about Whitecap Dakota? They did a comprehensive self-government agreement. That's the second one here, second bullet. that is pretty all encompassing, where they've negotiated with Canada to take on all of the jurisdictions that Canada, or all of the responsibilities that Canada has. Or you can do it a little bit at a time, sectorial or incremental. We don't want to do everything at once. It's too much work. Don't have the money, don't have the time, don't have the capacity, not interested. We're only interested in these specific priorities. That's what we want to focus on. Importantly, remember, this is not a treaty. Okay? Does not take away your status. You're not giving up land. You're not losing any rights, but you're not trading things off. You are looking at the lay of the land and saying, federal government, you're responsible for all of these things. We think we could do this a little bit better. Or we want to tinker with the way these things are happening. Right, Glad? Okay, so as mentioned, this is something that's currently being discussed with Canada, looking for direction from membership. I mentioned BC is not part of this because it doesn't concern British Columbia's responsibilities or jurisdiction. Anything off reserve is BC. That includes other people's reserves, okay? So it doesn't deal with all of the different ministries, Ministry of Forests, Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Waterland, all of those pieces. Doesn't deal with any of that. That said, BC is listening. They are observing. They're just not actively at the table talking about these things with you. But they know, because your leadership has said to them, hey, our CCP includes plans and objectives beyond the reserve. And if we start moving into that direction, what are you going to do, BC, to help that out? Right, buddy? Okay. Self-government agreement versus treaty. This is important because I'm going to really emphasize this as much as I can. If you remember very little from this evening, this is the one thing I do want you to remember, okay? Because the last thing we want is somebody perhaps misinterpreting what's being presented here or misinterpreting what I'm saying. And so I'll say it again. This is not a treaty. It takes back some of the powers of governance that the federal government exercises over you in the Indian Act, okay? It's not a modern treaty. It's not a land claim. If you want a treaty, then there's a whole other game for that. It's a whole other process. That's not what we're discussing here. There's still some limitations. So if you do move forward with your self-governance and you start making some changes and you start passing some laws, which you can do on reserve, those laws still have to respect certain federal laws. Like you can't discriminate, okay? You can't create a law that makes something that's currently illegal, legal, right? Although we'd want to maybe, but you can't. Okay, go ahead, buddy. Okay. So as Barb mentioned, we're discussing these things with the federal government. What does this look like? How does it work? What are the options? And this is called a recognition of Indigenous rights and self-determination. If we're in a room discussing self-governance and all these things I've mentioned, the sign on the door to that room says recognition of Indigenous rights and self-determination. So that's how you know what door to walk into. Okay. Canada funds this. So Shuswap has to submit a budget to Canada to say, okay, if we want to meet and discuss these options, we're not paying for it with our own source revenue. Canada, you've got to fund this. It takes a very long time to negotiate these sorts of things, these sorts of agreements, because it involves so much community input. Again, before this goes anywhere, we need to educate, meet with, but we want a community member being part of this. Again, to listen, observe, learn, share, and raise questions. No matter what happens in this process with the federal government and self-governance, the community has to vote on it. So you can negotiate self-governance with the federal government and say that you're going to take over certain responsibilities on your own. It's no longer the responsibility of the feds. You'll get funded by the feds to take on that responsibility. Everything may look great. You come to the community to vote on it, and your vote community might say, we changed our mind. No. Or your community might say, what took you so long? You know, you don't know until the time comes. Go ahead, Gladys. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the formal presentation. A lot of information. It's just scratching the surface. We try to provide some context, and the context is important. These discussions and these poking and prodding with Canada about self-governments didn't come out of the air. This was something that was kind of mandated through your comprehensive community plan, where your leaders looked around and said, okay, well, what are our options to try and achieve this comprehensive community plan? Otherwise, it's just a document sitting on the shelf. And you have succeeded in implementing many of those objectives. But you're heading to a point now where there's only so much more you can do without making some other kind of serious changes. Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Okay, it says, self governance, that we're trying to go out on our own to do what the people want,
Yeah,
but then you read further down the line, it says only if the government would have to still follow what the government is telling us. So how could it be self-government?
Okay, let me try and clarify that. So the Indian Act will still exist. Okay, and so that's the rule book, right? But through self-government, you can sit down with the federal government and look at that rule book and say, okay, we want to now be responsible for this. We want to now be responsible for this and this. And you negotiate that with the federal government. Now, the Indian Act still exists, but you have control over certain things that the federal government currently has control over. The question is, what are those things? So I think a survey was done not too long ago, asking these questions, had a pretty good response, actually. And asked these questions, what's of interest to you? It was kind of like a follow-up to the CCP. And some of the priorities that membership said was, we would like to have more control over our children and our families. Okay. I think that's pretty consistent. We would like to have more control over what the land of what's happening on the reserve. Well, hey, you know what? You already have the land code. You're kind of already there doing that. We would like to change and create for ourselves who a member of Shuswap is. We would like to change and create for ourselves our own custom election code and who can run and how often they run and all the particulars for being eligible. Those were the priorities that we got from that survey: children, family, election code, membership. So don't have the answer. But what I'm saying, Linda, is Indian Act will still exist, but you're removing the responsibility from those certain things away from Canada and saying, hey, we are capable of doing this on our own. And we are capable of running this on our own and developing this on our own. And we're going to seek community input to do all of those things. Importantly, part of a self-government agreement is you also negotiate a fiscal agreement, finances. So what does it cost to do all this? And other communities have done this, so there's templates and there's budget lines, this stuff already exists, we're not creating something new. In fact, we would really like to, either get people over to Whitecap, but it's probably easier to get them to come over here.
Where is Whitecap?
It's in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, like, you know, it's not a 9 iron away. Okay, this is a little bit down, yeah, this is that, maybe one of his wines was, but, it might be easier to get them to come here. I think it'd be pretty interesting, because like you, First Nations community in Canada, similar challenges, similar aspirations. Why did you do it? Why did you do that agreement? How did you do it? What wouldn't you do again? What would you do differently? So Chief Bear, BEAR, I think, he does a speaking tour because he's educating a lot of different First Nation communities about their experience. Might be kind of cool. Hey, come. You know, you got elk and salmon. And you know, and meet with the leadership, meet with the communities. Then you can throw a whole bunch of questions at them. You know, so Linda, that might be helpful. Really good opportunity to learn more from somebody who's done it, who's Indigenous. Yeah, go ahead there.
So, Rob, is it a trend that's really picking up self-determination? It's like
Yeah.
kind of happening across Canada right now with a lot of our communities, because you said, Chief Bear is doing his tours
Yeah.
around and doing that. So, number one, number two, so here we are, we're talking about, you know, negotiating with the government for funding, whatever. So who's doing that negotiation? Is this something that your organization will be leading us into, these negotiations? Like, have you been hired to do that for us?
Yeah. Okay, I'll answer both questions. So across Canada, let me quickly go back to 1763 proclamation. You can't give up, the Aboriginal people can't have the land taken away unless there's agreement. So you have across Canada historic treaties, Treaty 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So part of the rules of engagement are built into those treaties. In other areas where you don't have these historic treaties, or those treaties were neglected or they weren't honored and they've been cracked open and they're being renegotiated, you had the federal and the provincial or territorial governments, Renault's experienced this up in her past life as well, renegotiated. And a typical treaty, which is what we're used to hearing about, a modern day treaty, takes like a really, really long time, decades. And sometimes it doesn't get across the line, doesn't happen, you know? So the government has been tinkering with that and saying, okay, well, maybe that traditional modern day treaty isn't the way to go. Maybe we can do self-determination or self-governance tables that focus on the reserve, smaller scale negotiations, more achievable. You're not looking at a massive territory that involves 3 different governments, First Nations, provincial, and federal. It's just federal and First Nations. You're looking at a smaller footprint. You're looking at things that are just under the Indian Act. So yes, Dan, you are seeing a big movement away from treaties. And so in a lot of places in BC where there aren't treaties, modern day treaties, you're hearing of things called reconciliation agreements. The province is doing a lot of that right now. You're having agreements called pathway agreements. You still have the traditional modern day agreements through BC Treaty Commission's 6-7 steps to get there. But self-determination, reconciliation tables is another, relatively new occurrence that the governments are working on with First Nations communities. So yes, Chief of Whitecap, Dakota's been traveling around because people are seeing that this is a viable option that's achievable. Go ahead.
So you said that, we're working, communities across, Turtle Island, I guess, are moving towards that process. So
Yeah.
can you tell me, Rob, how Niska has done with their modern day treaty? I mean, it really was one of the first
It was-
and foremost
it was
and
the one-
biggest.
yeah.
So if we're going to compare, the two,
Yeah,
then, you know, it's sounding like this is the road to go. But how did Niska do
Right.
with their modern day treaty? Like, were they successful?
Yeah.
Is it
okay,
a good thing?
yeah, okay, so, let me answer your previous question. Currently, we've been sitting with Canada doing all this exploration. Yes, Fawn and I have been working with your leadership and meeting with Canada. Canada has been funding Shuswap to allow those discussions to happen. Yes, many years of experience doing this type of work with the First Nations community in Canada. Nishka. Nishka signed their modern day treaty, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, a long time ago.
Mm.
They did the whole enchilada. They took over all responsibilities from the federal government. Their reserves turned into treaty settlement lands or fee simple lands. They owned them. They also, in addition to their reserves that became their treaty lands, they identified other parcels throughout British Columbia within their territory, which they also own. If you look at a big circle being their territory, if this TV is their territory and where these letters are the lands they received for treaty, that's what they own. The rest of the TV is their harvest area, so they have treaty rights to harvest on land and in water. Their treaty rights. That was an exchange. They brought certainty to the federal and provincial governments because they defined their treaty rights. Because in BC, there's no treaties, Aboriginal rights and titles are proven in court, all sorts of uncertainty makes everybody scared. The Nisga'a negotiated treaty, it took very long. How are they doing?
Mm.
So there's a number of Nisga'a communities. It's not just the other ones living in one spot. They've got a bunch of different communities that are scattered about in their territory. Each one of those communities has government representatives. They have their own election code, treaty election. They have their own membership, who is eligible to be a treaty citizen, they would call it. They own their lands. They have the ability to tax on all of the lands that they own, whether you're indigenous or non-indigenous. If you're living on that, they can tax. This is how they generate some income. Their treaty also includes a fiscal finance agreement. So the government funds this treaty, gets reviewed every 5 years to top it up. Is it adequate? Here's an example. To run your government as treaty, if you've got to have a staff of 50 people, and chief and council get paid and got infrastructure, what does that cost? What does it cost to have a chief executive officer? What does it cost to have a human resource? Each of them have a budget line, then that's negotiated for, and that's part of the fiscal agreement that the Nisga'a receive. They get this money as part of the agreement. Why do they get it? Because they gave something up. Okay? They gave up some of their undefined rights for treaty rights. Right? So in exchange for that, the Nisga'a right now are on course for developing their own liquid natural gas port within their territory. They not only are majority indigenous owned in that liquid natural gas. So this is a big opera, big money. Okay. Big facilities off the coast, off of their lands, within their territory. They're owning it. Now they have some financial backers, that's okay. But they will also be owning the Western LNG pipeline, which takes that liquid natural gas from Northeast BC all the way across BC to their territory to go on those floating natural gas facilities. So they own the indigenous LNG facility and the pipeline. They're doing very well. Now, does that mean that all the community challenges and social challenges are dealt with? Not at all. You're going to get that no matter where you are, no matter who you are. But in terms of running their own government, it's taken them a while. In terms of economic self-sufficiency, it's taken them a while, but they're there. And the people that I know there, like I know the CEO, his name's Andrew Robinson, good guy, young guy, really bright, Nishka member. He's really grown, in his ability, and he's in charge, young person. Yeah,
So thank you, that was a
Yeah.
great answer. So I guess I want to know, before I have to leave, is what next for us then? So
Mhm.
here you are, you're like leading the ship.
yeah,
What happens for our community?
yeah. So right now, there were some priorities that the membership has articulated to leadership, election code, membership, children, family, what was another one?
Housing.
And housing. These are the priorities on reserve. We need to touchstone. Is that still the case? It came out in the CCP, it came out in a recent survey, assuming that's the case. Well, what does that look like? How do you get there? So the next discussions with Canada is, how do you chart this out? If Shoe Shop were to take over more control over those areas, what does it look like? What's the timeline? What is involved? We bring that back. The success of this, I believe, is going to be having meetings like this, pretty frequently to say, okay, this is what we learned. Verify with membership. This is what we learned. Verify for membership. Good. Yes. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. Good. Go.
So I think it'd be incredibly valuable to have Chief Bear come and speak to us. And second of all, the comprehensive community plan is a living document,
Mhm.
right? So it's continuous. So even, monthly, you could be reviewing,
Yeah.
bi-monthly. But it was always designed to be a living document.
Mhm.
Before self-determination, during and after.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, and is there still funding, comprehensive community plan funding to support that?
I think that is on the docket because, like you, I think your leadership feels the same way. This isn't static snapshot in time. Every time you ask, everyone has different experience every day. I get exposed to something new every day, new ideas. Great, love it. Bring it to the table. How do we help that support your comprehensive community plan, which is always changing? But I think that those consistent pieces, which we've kind of grabbed onto right now, housing, children, election, membership, that's been the consistent. And then as new things come on, is really going to require on having these things, these sorts of little gatherings over and over again. And somebody wanted the beef from the barbecue shop, and maybe that's the next thing that we do. Gladys. And, but I think that's kind of this ongoing living, this is a living process too.
Rob,
Yeah.
how big is, that band, the white?
Do you know by
Yeah.
chance?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I don't have the
I've been
answer.
looking, so, Canada gave us some, I don't know, about 5 or 6 different, communities that have done this. And so I think West Bank is like this big,
Yeah,
whereas White Cap is very, that doesn't have a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, things that I think they think, or I think they're the most like us. I was just wondering, like, we're about 300.
What are they?
They're 600.
So they're double the size, but the reason why what Canada likes Whitecap Dakota, which makes you want to speak to Chief Barry even more, is because it was achieved in a reasonable amount of time and it focused on certain things that the community wanted, as opposed to as opposed to a never-ending story.
So would you consider that incremental that they did, or a comprehensive, like a whole, all of it at once, or did
Yeah.
they do one thing at a time? Yeah, it was a comprehensive.
Yeah, just Indian Affairs stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Could we do like internal processes along with that as well? Like, say we wanted to change our referral system or our, just for example, or, you know, chunk things out internally and then community based and then
Yeah.
state title and rights and on different.
Yeah, so, outside, okay, anything exterior looking that touches the province, we have to deal with the province.
Right.
But internally, if, for example, you're working on your government infrastructure, so you've got a new election code, let's say, you have a new membership code, let's say, you're working on positions within your government structure. I think there's an opportunity to make small g governance changes. That would be small g, like, you know, administrative pieces, but it's certainly something we can look into more and get back to you, if that's a specific example, right?
Yeah, just. Brains going a
Yeah,
mile a minute, I know.
yeah. So this won't be the last meeting. And we have everyone's names, so we expect, you know, at the very minimum, everyone here to come back next meeting. And, you know, we'll probably be doing those, you know, it doesn't hurt to do surveys kind of ongoing, just to take the temperature. But yeah, that's all we had for you guys today. Just wanted to share that, some of this information and some of these options. And I think from leadership's perspective, for those that are involved in the CCP, either running it or participating in it, your voice is being heard. And I think that's something that, you know, you can't kind of take away. There's been some accomplishments and stuff that's already done, and you're looking at more to do more. Okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for everything.
And that will.
Bingo.
When you pull up the field, or they just get people to.
Diana,
people
that
know
picture
just
made me
where
feel
it
so
is.
old.
I know.
Because there would be some.
When I first started here, it's almost 11 years ago.
I think you're old. I was the one that started. What year was that?
That was 2016,
So I would have been 2012.
2012, when you, yeah. That's the one that
You know.
Yeah.
Well, that was crazy. Yeah. Feels like I've been around a long time.
Okay, so can everyone just take a peek? Oh, we're gonna put the wheel up.
And for the.
Just take a peek and make sure.
Refresh us. What's the deal?
We look forward to
Blatty, is Cheryl and Marlene's name on there?
I already won it. I already won. No. I actually get to put my name in.
Wait, no, Dave might say, never mind.
Beat up
Could I have? Hello, this is Victoria. Could you put my name on there too?
Yeah, Victoria's on
Oh.
there. And we need Shelley for.
Yeah, we're more having for 16 at home.
Yeah.
Candace, did you put your name down?
Shelley, this is fine.
Well, I that's my pee break.
That's it.
I don't, I missed the.
Did you ever get a hold of him? You got.
Yeah.
Do,
Human right.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to what you're grabbing or?
With the main one, which is the Shoe Shop Strong cutting board and
We're gonna
a
start the door prize.
$100 gift card to Joe No Frills.
Drum roll.
Whitney,
Whitney,
yay,
you want us to bring it down for you?
Whitney what?
Yeah.
Whitney.
Good job, Whitney.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Susie.
Bring what?
Whitney, I'm going to give this to Susie to get to you.
We'll give it to.
Okay, thank you.
What'd you win?
How many more are we doing? I can give it to Dan.
What'd you get? Huh?
How many?
You win a total?
We've got a mix of a sketchbook, a little pouch and a, keychain. Got it? Okay,
Yes.
glad you got it. Okay, and we've got some salmon. So we'll do the first salmon.
Auntie.
Barb? Barb, you want? Barb,
Oh, no.
okay, make another name. Chief said do it again. Linda.
Auntie. Do two now, Auntie.
Another salmon.
The bottom line's
Two.
15 minutes left.
Devin.
Like what?
That's Junior Salmon Chief, very pretty. One more. Angela, I'll hold it for you, Angela, if you can pick it up in the office. And everyone will be getting the honorarium as well. So, love to see that.
Landmark just giving away the hats and everything.
Yes, we will. Thanks, everyone, for joining online. Bye, Jenna. Yeah.
Or you want the red one? All the trophies.